Om Asato Ma Sadagamaya Tamaso Maham Jyotirgamaya Mrityurmam Amritam Gamaya Avir Avir Maehi Rudra Yate Dakshinam Mukha Te Namaham Pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality, and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is worship of the Spirit by the Spirit. And we can begin with a fundamental teaching of the Vedanta philosophy, and that is that you are the Spirit. You are not the body, the flesh and blood body that's born, grows old, and dies. You are not the lake of the mind, disturbed by the winds of desire and of thoughts and feelings. You are not the role that you play in the melodrama of life. You are not the person that you think yourself to be, but you are a divine, immortal soul. You are the Spirit. The Spirit is, by definition, immaterial. It is transcendental. It's not psychological, it's parapsychological. It is our true self. By the word spirit, in Vedanta, we mean consciousness. We mean pure consciousness, but we mean also your own self-consciousness. In Sanskrit, it's called yourself. It's called the Atman. The Atman is the principle of subjectivity. And just as we have within us a principle of subjectivity, a self, so too there is in the universe around us, there is a principle of objectivity. That is, just as we have a spirit within us, so there is a universal spirit, a spirit that pervades all things, that which is the ground of being, which is the substance, which is the source of all things. In Sanskrit, this is the ultimate reality called Brahman. Brahman is the God of Vedanta. Brahman is an infinite, one only without a second. Brahman, the all-pervading reality of this world, is impersonal. It's nameless and formless, but it appears as all names and forms. It's impersonal, but it appears as all of the persons in the world. Brahman appearing as the world, we call Ishvara. Ishvara is the impersonal, personal God of Vedanta. And the goal of spiritual life is to see God in everything, to see the ultimate reality everywhere. Now, when we say that our goal in spiritual life is to see the Spirit, that is to see God, that is to see ourself in everything, well, everything is a pretty tall order. Because when you think of everything, then we have to think about the dirt and the rocks, and we have to think about the plants and the bushes and the trees, and we have to think about the houses and the cars and all the people, and then the angels and whatever else is in the seven worlds above. That's the world. So to see God in everything is, maybe it would be good if we could focus and we could begin to see God in one thing. And the best place for us to begin to see this universal spirit is in the heart and mind of the universal man. That is in the heart and mind of a human person. In the hearts of every man. That's our goal, to see God in every man. Now, it's true that we can get water anywhere on the earth. You dig and dig far enough, maybe you'll find water. But it's much easier to get water if you dig in a well. And it's true that the sun reflects off of everything in the whole universe. But much easier for us to get a clear picture of the sun if we were to look in a mirror. And it is the mirror, the only mirror that we have, that is, man was created in the image of God. Therefore, if we want to see God, we can't see God directly, and we don't know what God is like. But if we look in the mirror, if we look in which is the yoga psychology, that is the buddhi, the higher mind of man, is like a mirror and reflects that image of God. And there we can see the image of God, a perfect, beautiful picture it is of all that we can think, our highest generalization, our highest abstraction of what is God, what does God mean? That is consciousness, freedom, goodness, and this is the basic nature of the fundamental teaching of Indian philosophy. That is the divinity of man manifested in human consciousness. So that's our goal, to see God in everything, to see God, now we've narrowed it down, to see God in every man. And of course, when we see God, if you ever were to see God, then your natural response of the psyche, it would be to worship. That's natural law. It's not that you should worship, that you ought to worship, but that you do worship according to natural law, in the presence of divinity. So seeing God means to worship God. To worship, to see the Spirit everywhere, is to worship the Spirit. And so then we can ask ourselves, well, if we are to worship the Spirit, how would we worship the Spirit in every man? And, well, we're talking about a new religion. We're talking about a new form of spiritual practice. We know very well what it means to worship God in the form of an image or an idol in the shrine or in the temple. But now we're talking about a kind of a whole different perspective. We're talking about worshiping the Spirit in humankind, in man. How would that look? How do we do that? Well, maybe we can think, just to get started, we could see that we know that in religions everywhere that people pay their respects to wise men and to holy man. Holy man, if we go to India, certainly we can see that it's common practice that when you meet a holy man, that you bow down, take the dust of their feet, and salute them, and show your feeling of, it's not worship, but it's certainly a show of reverence, of veneration. And certainly it is that when we, it's common in all religions to revere and to venerate the saints who have passed on, who live in heaven. And sometimes we see devotees when they that's kind of, we could say, the worship of the man God, in a sense, that is special man. You remember, in particular, I think about an incident there in the life of the saint of Tiruvannamalai, that is Ramana Maharshi, you know his name, and how on one occasion he was meditating alone in a cave in the Arunachala hill. And there he absorbed in samadhi, oblivious of the outside world. And devotees came to that ashrama seeking out the darshan of the holy man. And they were told that always up in that cave, and they wended their way up to the cave, went in, called out, no answer. They came in there, the darkness, and there they saw him seated there in meditation. And the devotees went over, and there they they prostrated themselves before him, offered flowers, offered fruits. And then one of the women broke a coconut. It's traditional way, to worship idols. You break the coconut, poured that water over the head of Ramana Maharshi. Yeah, so, well, we don't know what happened after that, but well, we can see that this kind of worship of the spirit in human form, that's kind of impractical. That's really not what we're talking about. But worship of the spirit, how do you do it? Well, I remember in India, if you go to India around the time of the Durga Puja, there you will see a particular worship program. It's called the Kumari Puja. In the Kumari Puja, they take a young girl is chosen. A girl means 10 years old. And she is decked out in the Banarasi sari and all of the jewels and gold and ornaments, and is placed on the dais, and surrounded by priests and by monks. There may be 10,000 people in attendance. And the worship begins. And there she sits there on the altar. And she's worshipped by the priests, and you can hear the chanting of the Sanskrit mantras and the incense going up to heaven. And it's all a very amazing and impressive sight. When I first saw that, I thought, well, this is a good example of at least you gotta have one example of worship of God in human form. But later, when I talked to one of the priests, I found out it wasn't quite as what I thought it was. I thought it was like a monistic worship. But he explained that no, that the Kumari is, we're not worshiping the Kumari. The Kumari, that is this girl, is she's just like a clay image. She's just like an idol. And it's in her body, so she's functioning kind of like a channel. And in her body, the priests with the mantras invoke the presence of the Divine Mother Durga. And the Durga comes and inhabits her body for that period, that time. And therefore she is therefore worshipped. So we can see that they were not worshiping a little different spirit. That is to say, it's a little different a different mindset than what I thought it was. So what are you talking here about? Worship of the Spirit of God in man. In Sanskrit, it's called the worship of Nara-Narayana. Those are the Sanskrit words. Nara means man, Narayana means God. So the worship of God in man. If you read in the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, 4 lectures delivered in 1896 in London, entitled Practical Vedanta. It's all about practical Vedanta. And it's in those lectures that he gives us a whole new radical definition of what worship means. What is worship? And how do we worship according to the non-dualism of teaching of the Vedanta philosophy? And in there he set forth the teachings of the worship of God and man. How do we understand? Well, what is worship? Well, to worship means to concentrate your mind on God, and by doing some kind of structured ritual, some kind of service. To worship is to serve. So now we have a clue here as to how we can proceed if we are to see God in everyone. That is, if we visualize God in another person. And if we do that, that's the whole process, which we've discussed on other occasions. How do you do that? How do you see God? God is in everything. That's the teaching. How do you see God in everything? That's another subject. This morning we're talking about once you are established in the practice of seeing God in every man, how and you feel that natural response, which is to worship, which is part of the natural law. It has nothing to do with your temperament or anything like that. Then how do we do that? Well, the answer is to worship is to serve. Now, serve, what does that mean? Well, we serve. We used to have back in the olden days what they used to call service stations. Well, maybe some people don't know about those. You drive your car in, and the attendant comes running out, and he fills up your tank with gasoline and washes your windows and does everything for you as he gave you. It's all service. Today, if you go to a restaurant and you order a dinner, well, your waiter will come and he will serve you your meal. So similarly it is when we think about service. If we were to serve another person, how would we do? Well, it would depend on the time, the place, the fitness of the circumstances, what would be appropriate way to give them what they need. That means is that if there was a person who was homeless, he had no place to sleep, that maybe we could find him a place to sleep, give him a blanket. If someone was hungry, then we could maybe help them to get some food. If that person was sick, then maybe we could help them to find some medical help. And if that person needed education, that we could provide for them some education. Thus, in this way, we could begin to engage ourselves in the worship of the Spirit. The object of our worship is a real living human being. That is a living, breathing God. Now, we're not talking now about the worship we're not talking here about working with deities. And we're not talking here about 4-armed and 10-armed gods and goddesses that live in the sky. And we're not talking about Jungian archetypes that somehow inhabit the collective unconscious, or some imaginary, we're not even talking here about a picture of gods and goddesses that are in our shrine or in our temple. Rather, we're talking about engaging with a real living person, because it's in that living person that we can see the reflection of divinity, because man was created in the image of God, and rocks weren't. I mean, yeah, according to Vedanta, of course, you can worship rocks. You can worship trees. And this all wonderful, fabulous history of religion. We know that we can very well. That's where it all begins. We go from but where does it end? It ends with the apex, in the apex of evolution, that is, in mankind, and in the evolution of the conscious higher mind that reflects those qualities, those divine qualities. So, now you may say, think that, well, what you've just said, it sounds very familiar to those of us raised in a Judeo-Christian tradition. Certainly, it sounds very familiar, what you just said. You're just talking here about humanitarian service. Is that what you're talking about? Are you talking about, and it's true, well, it's true. It's true that the humanitarian service organizations, of which we have whole armies of humanitarian nonprofit service organizations in America, doing exactly the kind of thing that I said was serving a man. They're doing that same thing. And therefore we can see that it would, at first glance, that is from the point of view of behavioral science, there's really not much difference between the behavior of a volunteer and the humanitarian worker, and someone who is worshiping God in man. Doesn't seem to be much outward difference in their outward behavior and their appearance. But if we, as students of yoga psychology, as we look within, we find that there is a world of difference. There's a difference in the world view. There is a difference. Now we're talking about here the psychodynamics of karma, which we've discussed on other occasions, and what is an action, and what makes a good action. This is all part of the study of the great law of karma and karma yoga. And so yes, there is a difference. There's a difference in the worldview. There's a difference in the motivation. There is a difference in the intention and action. There is a difference in the purpose. There's a difference in the means. There's a difference in the end. And there's a difference in the fruits of that action that accrue to the doer. I'll quote to you a statement from Swami Virajananda. Swami Virajananda was a past president of the Ramakrishna order, Ramakrishna Mission. And there he says that I'll paraphrase it. It says this worship of a God in man, that is this worship of Nara-Narayana, is an entirely new kind of spiritual practice. It is unlike that of the volunteers of the Salvation Army. It is unlike the practice of the bhikkhus during the Buddhist period. Is radically different from the practice of the Roman Catholic monks during the Middle Ages. And this is a new a new kind of worship practice that begins with this new dispensation. So that's from Swami Virajan, the past president of the Ramakrishna order. Let's try to look a little bit more carefully here at this. Give you an example of what it means to worship God. What's the difference? I'm going to try to make it a little more graphic, maybe. What's the difference? Let's take scenario number 1. We'll compare it with scenario number 2. Scenario number 1, you're in Los Angeles, and you're walking down the street, and you're on a shopping trip. You have your destination in mind, and as you are moving on the sidewalk, a person accosts you, stops you, and asks, can you spare some change? Now that's the activating event. Now you look at that person, and you have a little social cognition. You see that his clothes are rumpled, and his shoes are scuffed and dirty, and he has some few poor belongings in a bag next to him, and you conclude that he is indeed a homeless person. And seeing that, you of course feel, you have a feeling of sympathy. You have a feeling of empathy. You have a feeling of compassion. You feel, I should do something. I should help him. And so maybe you reach into your pocket and you take out some coins. You hand him those, thank you, sir, he says to you. You drop those coins in his hand, and then you go on your way. And you feel pretty good. And that's the event. Now, what just happened there? What just happened is that you just did a good work. You just practiced a little Christian charity. That is, you were a good Samaritan, as far as he's concerned. You were the good Samaritan, and you did what all along you'd heard was a good thing to do. And you wanted to help the man, and as a result of which, doing that good work, according to the law of karma, their good fruits will accrue. Not only did you become a better person at that instant, because your character changed, but you set in motion a whole cycle of a concatenation of events in the great law of karma. That is, you did a deed, and that means punya. That means you have merit now, which is due to return to you, according to the great law of balance. That fruit of that action, that good work, will return to you and will be good for you. The circumstances in your future life will improve because of that good work. That is, you've done your dharma. We would say in the Indian philosophy, it's called you're a good citizen, and you do your dharma. Let's compare that with scenario number 2. Now, scenario number 2, we have to take a different kind of a guy, because he's also on his shopping trip, maybe. But maybe he's in the habit now of beginning to practice, thinking about God. His practice is to see God in everything. And in fact, when he hears those words of that panhandler addressing him, he turns and looks And kind of part of that training is that you don't look. You've kind of trained yourself not to look at the clothes, at the shoes, at the bag of belongings. Rather, you look in the eyes of the person, the eyes of the window of the soul. And there you have visualized that, so now you encounter here with a divine immortal soul. How do you feel seeing him there? Well, of course, he's going to ask you, do you have some change? Well, how do you feel about that? Do you feel, you don't feel any sympathy? You don't feel any empathy? You don't feel compassion? Compassion is an interesting word in the Vedanta philosophy. That is, we salute the compassion of the great Lord Buddha. But usually when we hear about compassion in common parlance, it has nothing to do with real, with Buddhist compassion. That is, how would you feel if I were to say to you, oh, I feel compassion for you? How would you feel if I were to say, can I help you? I can help you. So you feel a little bit, so like this, your attitude, this is your attitude. So the attitude of the first person, that was his attitude. I have compassion on this person. I will help this person. What does that mean? That means that all that is implication there is that I'm higher. How do you help? The higher helps the lower. The person who is higher reaches down, it's called agape, like God reaches down to help the lower, to lift the lower up. We in fact say that. I'll give him a hand up. I'll give him a hand up. That means I'm up. He's not, so I'll lift him up. You see it's a kind of a subtle, very subtle argument there, but this is the way the yogis think. They're thinking about on this subtle level, you see, which, by the way, the subtle, of course, is the most powerful. That's the foundation. That's the foundational thought that changes everything. That the idea is that it's not because you're going to act out of compassion, out of sympathy, out of empathy, or anything like that. No, you're going to act out of gratitude, where we feel that is it's not I'm going to help him. That is, it's helping me. I'm the one who will benefit from this. Therefore, you may say, well, yes, give him a few coins and say, yes, thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Smile, you look him at there. So that's the transaction. I don't want to be too Pollyanna-ish about it, but you can kind of get the spirit of how it's a different construction is put on the behavior and how it has changed, the transaction from dharma to yoga. That is, from dharma to karma yoga. Big change. Dharma makes you a better person, but it does not make you a saint. You can't get liberation by doing your dharma. You have to do your dharma as karma yoga. You have to do it you have to do the practice. It's this practice that now that I've explained to you in a kind of a inadequate way. That's why you read Swami Vivekananda, Practical Vedanta, 4 lectures delivered in London. You can get in more detail. You can also begin to think about the work of this Vedanta society. That is let's think about in India. This society comes from is part of the largest humanitarian organization in the whole of India. It's called the Ramakrishna Mission. It's part of the Ramakrishna order. That is an extension of the Ramakrishna order. And the Ramakrishna Mission is sometimes called for people that are outsiders, politicians often refer to it as the Salvation Army of India that responds to when there are great disasters or hurricanes and floods and fires and famine, all of this, that the monastics and the lay devotees of the Ramakrishna Mission will respond on the occasion. Sometimes the Ramakrishna Mission is called the fire department. It's the fire department of modern India, because they're first to respond to those difficult times, all the time doing their service as worship of God, as spiritual practice. In fact, that is the motto of this Ramakrishna order, Ramakrishna Mission, Atmano Mokshartam Jagadhitaya Cha, that is for your own liberation and the good of the world. So you're doing a kind of a spiritual practice, and although it may be perceived as humanitarian service, it's not humanitarian service in the sense that we use the word humanism today. Humanism is the default, secular humanism is the default religion of America. But we don't mean humanism in that sense. We mean it more in the sense of the Renaissance sense of humanism. Today, you can see in the Western world, that is in the Vedanta societies, we have that same tradition, we have that same ideal, but our work is a little different here. We do not provide homes for the homeless. We do not. Our work, that is the focus of our work, is not to provide food for the hungry, not to provide medicine for the sick, not to provide education for the illiterate, but it is to do work as worship. To worship is to serve. How do we serve? We serve that which is the most acute need of the people. And in America, the acute need, well, we already have a whole army of social service organizations that address these former needs. So in America, not only do we serve the needs of American citizens, but of people in disaster all over the world. It's a well-known fact that America is the most compassionate country in the world. No one else does all this social service for different countries and disasters. But in Vedanta, let's talk about Vedanta. Our focus, however, is to address what is the acute need of America today, and that is that in America today, we are also suffering, not for want of food or clothes, but for want of some new vision, for some want of some new religion, some new philosophy, some new value system. That is, we hunger and thirst after a new religion. We need to rebuild the foundations of our philosophy of life. And it is with an eye on that goal and purpose that the Vedanta Society, which the purpose of the first line there of the bylaws of the society is to promote the teaching, practice, and study of the Vedanta philosophy. That's our purpose. That's our goal. That's our target. That's our area of control. That's not our area of concern. Our area of concern is vast. That's like the target. There's the big circles. There's the white circle and the blue and the yellow and the yellow circle right in the middle. That's the target. That's the circle of concern. That's our focus. And so, but we too, our ideal is to do the work in the spirit of worship of God in man. And so We can see then that this is a kind of a new experiment. It's a new religion. We can't really call it bhakti yoga, but it has all the benefits and essential aspects of bhakti. We can't really call it Raja Yoga or Jnana Yoga, but it has the essential spirit of those, certainly of Karma Yoga, somehow combining. It's a new form of practice that combines all of those yogas into one practice and one focus, and it enables us to define our goal and our vision in life, which is to discover the spirit within ourselves. Well, we didn't talk about this morning so much, but discover the spirit, worship of the spirit in all things, and learning to see God in everything. Om Dyo Shantihi Antariksha Ham Shantihi Prithivi Shantihi Apa Shantihi Oshadaya Shantihi Vanaspataya Shantihi Vishwe Deva Shantihi Brahma Shantihi Saravam Shantihi Shantireva Shantihi Same Shantiredhi Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Om, peace is in heaven, peace is on the earth, peace is in the sky and in the waters. The herbs and plants and trees are full of peace. The gods are peaceful. May this eternal universal peace enter our souls and beings. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all.
Yep. That's it. Wait.
Is that a wrap?
That's it, it's a wrap.
Good.